So this panel will focus on international cooperation and standard setting. Now, AI is not just a domestic issue, right? I mean, you see so many countries are racing to regulate AI. And this is a global phenomenon, and its operations would have global ramification as well. So we'll explore this topic with four distinguished guests. On my right-hand side is Brian Te. Are you from Hong Kong?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And I'm not good. I'm Cantonese. I can pronounce your last name in Cantonese, but in English it's hard for me to pronounce. Brian is the founder and CEO of Concordia AI, which is a Beijing-based social enterprise focused on AI safety and governance. He is also a policy affiliate at the Center for the Governance of AI. Actually, Brian moderated a fantastic panel at the Hong Kong UST just a few days ago, and I was a speaker. So now our role is flip. Okay, I'll give you a hard time this time. Okay, Huang Yi, also from Hong Kong, welcome, and is a senior program manager at Concordia AI, where she leads projects to promote international cooperation on AI safety and governance. And I got to know Huang Yi when I attended a conference at Yale Law School a few months ago, and Huang Yi is absolutely amazing. So I'm so excited to have you on this panel. We have two Concordian representatives on this panel. And then on my left-hand side is Jiaqi, who's usually mistaken for a girl, with your name. Yes. Jiaqi is the chief expert of AI governance industry development at the Institute of Strategic Research at Huawei. He's responsible for AI governance strategy, industrial cooperation, and standardization. I really look forward to hearing what you're going to say about standard setting, because it's such an important area. And I personally think this is probably the most promising path for international cooperation. Bennett is looking at this, I know you probably have a lot to say. And then we bring back Hiroki Habuka, who's a research professor at Kyoto University and the CEO of Smart Government. Today I found out that you have, another gift is that you're really humorous. That's really rare among Japanese. Yeah. Okay. So let me start with the first question with Hiroki. Why do you think that international cooperation is so important for regulating generative AI? One argument was that, look, AI could potentially pose existential risk to the extent that you have geopolitical tension. There's a bigger risk out there that's why it demands international cooperation. What are your thoughts on this?
Hello again. Yes, there are a lot of reasons why we need international cooperation. So let me start from the general discussion. General means not only about AI, but in anything. Regulation is costly. It causes a lot of costs for companies and also regulators for monitoring and enforcement costs. So if you can achieve your goals, political goals, societal goals without regulation, it's better. But sometimes you need regulation. But still, and if you have a regulation, regulatory fragmentation is a lot of costs. So everybody wants to avoid regulatory fragmentation, especially about technologies that could be applied globally. And also, regulation could make mistakes. In Japan, it takes at least 2 or 3 years to make a new regulation. And 2 or 3 years in AI field is just very, very long, too long to catch up with. So in that sense too, we should cooperate in information exchange so that the new risks could be swiftly reflected to other jurisdictions' regulations. And when we talk about more specific risks on AI, for example, AI has lack of predictability or explainability, so we don't know what happens with AI, especially about generative AI that was just adopted from 2023 in general. And also generative AI has countless risk scenarios. It's essential to continuously exchange the risks among different jurisdictions, and that is already done through the umbrella of the UN or OECD or a bilateral declaration. I mean, AISFT summit that will be discussed later. And another aspect is that we have a lot of stakeholders on the value chain of AI, like data providers, AI developers, AI designers, or users, or cloud providers, or telecommunication providers, etc. So there is no simple AI regulation. So how to frame the regulation for each different stakeholders is a real challenge. And that is why, for example, EU has a lot of regulations just introduced in the previous panel, which is related to AI. And finally, AI evokes a lot of ethical challenges such as privacy and social good, etc. And I think Mr. Liu will talk about that point maybe later. So yeah, that is a very brief overview of why we need close international cooperation in a continuously and timely manner.
Yeah, Jiaqi, would you like to chime in on this? I mean, people say, there's so much emphasis on this existential risk because these AI companies want to divert us from the more immediate, divert our attention from the more immediate risk, like what John talked about earlier this morning, right? I mean, do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think firstly, thanks for the invitation to this discussion, and that's a really good question. So actually, I'm agree that we should be prepared and should be ready for both the risks long term and the short term. Yeah. So that's why, but to achieve this, of course, we need the effective international cooperation, and joined by different stakeholders. Yeah, so we cannot believe that we can manage the risks brought by the technology like AI without an effective international cooperation, without the cooperation by nations, worldwide, especially by the cooperation between the main AI powers. So because as a generative technology, AI can go beyond the borders, and its application it's such ubiquitous. So the concerns about the diffusion and abusing use and even malicious use can only be addressed properly by a global collaboration. And secondly, I want to share. Many experts mentioned that last month, in the UK AI summit, actually the declaration was made by the main AI nations. I think that's the first AI safety declaration made by the main AI powers. Actually, it takes a long time. It's not easy. If we look back to the 2017, when the IEEE issued the first AI governance related standards, and since then in 2019, according to the statistic by a paper, then there were already over 70 AI governance principles. So that means we are facing the actually, as really Hiroko said, we are facing a fragmented AI governance principles. So I think that's another reason. We needed the international cooperation. In the AI governance principle level. Fortunately, we achieved this in principle level, and but it takes almost 2 years, 6 years. The last point I want to say that in parallel, we're getting consensus on principles level. Actually, the effort to exploring engineering practice to achieve these abstract principles is ongoing. Many AI governance frameworks have been provided by different stakeholders. According to the observation by OECD, Yeah, there are already over 700 governance framework. Yeah, that's another kind of fragmentation. Yeah, so that's the another situation. Yeah, we are facing fragmentation as well in the practical level. So the collaboration between the industry and the academic, I think in the practical level, in implementation level, I think it's also important. Thank you.
Brian, you want to talk?
Yeah, I want to make a quick remark. So there are issues such as privacy, bias, and hallucination that could be governed by individual governments according to their political and cultural conditions. But then there are risks such as the use of AI for cyber attacks, or even the use of AI in designing biological pathogens. These risks do not respect national borders. And so it is in the latter category that we really need an international approach. So that's point number one. The second point is that we need to address both the immediate harms and the potential catastrophic risks in our public policy portfolio. So if we take the example of climate change, of course, the international community address both the current harms to the environment as well as potential catastrophic consequences if we have 2 to 4 degrees increase of temperature in the coming decades. And in fact, I think we tend to neglect the tail risk. For example, in the history of financial crisis, we tend to neglect that kind of low probability but high consequence risk. And this is something that we need to bear in mind with risk management in AI as well. But I would say many proposals in risk management is helpful for both immediate harms as well as potential catastrophic risk. So if we take the example of requiring developers to have greater transparency and have reporting requirements, if we develop high-risk foundation models, that policy proposal is helpful for a range of societal impacts and risk mitigation. So I think a lot of the potential actions are not a zero-sum game. They have a lot of synergies.
Very good. Let me stick with you. So I remember a few months ago, Eric Schmidt, the CEO of, is it former CEO or is he still a CEO?
Former
CEO of Google, and Mustafa Sullivan. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's really hard.
CEO of Inflection, former co-founder at DeepMind.
DeepMind, yeah. I mean, they have an op-ed at Financial Times saying that we should use an IPCC model to do that, to create a global AI governance regime. And following on that, they were very aggressively promoting that at the UK summit. And it seems like, there's a trend pushing for creating a global AI governance regime model after the climate change, this organization called IPCC. But, they're not the first one to propose this kind of borrowing from existing templates of international cooperation and to use it on AI, right? I mean, way back earlier, there were scholars proposing, there are things that we can look at how aviation, the global cooperation on aviation, global cooperation on financial regulation, global cooperation on nuclear power. We can look at these models of regulation, cooperation, all these organizations, and we can borrow from the experience. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we have this amazing list of historical acronyms, right? All the IPCC, IAEA, and so on.
Can you first tell them what IPCC is?
Yes, International Panel on Climate Change. But before I talk about specific examples, I think the main message is that we need to focus on the actual goals and objectives for international AI governance, rather than relying too much on historical analogies. So for international AI governance, I think we need at least 5 functions. One is scientific consensus building. Second is coordination of policy and standards. Third is some kind of emergency response. Fourth is international joint research, especially on safety. And then finally, distribution of benefits and assets. So far, we haven't really talked about the interests of the global south, which I think is very important. But then to go along with the question of, IPCC, I think it's an analogy that applies quite well to AI, where we still do not have a credible, scientific consensus on a range of issues for AI ethics and safety, ranging from bias and fairness to impact on cybersecurity and disinformation, and we really need to kind of turn all the academic papers and open letters into something that could be digested by the global policy-making community. And I think right now the main effort is the State of Science report led by Yoshua Bengio, and many of you would know that he is a Turing Award winner, and it was announced at the Global AI Safety Summit. So I think that's the part on scientific consensus building. Another example I would like to highlight is the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency in nuclear power. So if we look at the history of IAEA, it really had a dual mandate, a double mandate. So on the one hand, we want to maximize the potential benefits from the safe and peaceful use of nuclear energy. On the other hand, of course, we want to kind of restrict and regulate the proliferation of dangerous nuclear materials. And IAEA has two departments, right? One is the safeguard department, focusing on the monitoring and the verification. And then it also has a technical support department, helping people to gain access to the peaceful use of nuclear energy. And it's really difficult, right? And I think it's going to be even more challenging with AI, where you have these general purpose foundation models that can, help kids and students have, useful information and have kind of private tutoring. But obviously, the same chatbots can be used to manipulate and deceive people with disinformation campaigns. And so the challenge is, how do we kind of disentangle the dual use nature from AI and kind of have a effective global AI governance regime? So I think that's my response.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure whether these existing templates would necessarily, be a very good model for AI, especially regulating AI, because for the most part, we kind of know what we get from, the mechanisms of how nuclear power work or climate change and aviation. But with AI, the risk is so speculative, right? I mean, even the engineers, even the technicians themselves don't know, computer scientists don't know, what will happen after we upgrade the model, what put in the data, what will come out of it. Like, I mean, it's so speculative and unpredictable that will make it even more challenging for assessing its risk. And then that will also be a problem for international cooperation. Now, let me ask this question for Hiroki, because you are very actively involved in international cooperation. I remember, were you leading Japan in the G7 discussions on AI? Did you go to the UK summit?
No.
Not for the UK summit?
Not unfortunately, but I was closely working with government officials who are in charge of international negotiations, including G7 Hiroshima AI process. Yeah, and my personal observation is that still we are struggling to find out which areas to collaborate. For example, the G7 countries recently issued a Hiroshima Comprehensive Policy Framework to challenge to tackle these challenges brought by advanced AI, which is basically generative AI. And there are like as many as 12 principles that will be considered as an important area for cooperation, including risk identification and mitigation. Number 2, vulnerability and misuse management. Number 3, transparency and accountability. Number 4, responsible information sharing. Number 5, governance and risk management, etc. So, and I think all of you are familiar with those principles, but unfortunately, there are no specific initiative to do actions. even within G7 countries. The only thing I would say has some certain concrete contents is watermarking, AI watermarking for AI generated contents. But it's easy to say watermarking, but how to design the watermarking? What kind of information should be included in the watermarking? And again, as I always say, human beings don't sign on every document or contents you make, and why AI generated contents need some signs. So I understand that some contents could be politically harmful, but on the other hand, if you watermark all contents that were generated by AI, sometimes there might be critical privacy risks if that watermark contains information about which computer, which account was used to make these contents, or etc. So, and also there is a risk that somebody forges fake watermarking on the contents to address that this content is actually generated by AI. So there are a lot of discussions that should that should be done. And what I'm sure is that this kind of discussion cannot be conducted by only the government people. So there is a strong necessity for cooperation among industries and engineers, and also civil communities, and also government policy makers. So yeah, so at least under G7 umbrella, nothing remarkable has been achieved. And it could be even more challenging if we try to include more various stakeholders, like, of course, China or Middle East or African countries. So in that sense, Breakthrough Declaration was a remarkable achievement because it includes a lot of different countries, including Africa, Middle East, China, Japan, and European countries, of course, and the US. And again, it's not so advanced in terms of the action. So I really don't know what can be done as a next step, to be honest.
I really appreciate your very frank and candid response, despite the fact that you were leading, you were part of, you were leading this. But you were at the UK summit. I saw you on TV. There was a live stream, and I saw you asked a very good question. Tell us, what are the takeaways from the summit? Have there been any concrete things coming out from the conference?
Yeah.
Or is it just a show?
Yeah, I was attending the day one where 100 experts and researchers gathered to discuss the risk from the most advanced AI systems. That includes a perspective of potential misuse, loss of control, unexpected capabilities, as well as societal impact. And I think the Breakthrough Declaration was really the first international consensus on this frontier AI risk. And the three examples that the declaration gave was disinformation, the impact on biosecurity, and impact on cybersecurity. I think they are pretty concrete, and I'm looking forward to further actions based on this consensus. So apart from the State of Science report led by Joshua Bengio, there is also the AI Safety Institute in the UK and US, and also similar discussions in Singapore. And looking for
on safety, where China might be part of it.
The network where China will be part of it is the State of Science report. And
research institute that are promoting like AI safety. No,
it's mainly the national institutions,
Right.
based in UK and elsewhere. And they're looking to reconvene in 6 months in South Korea and then 12 months in France. And I think the significance so far is more on the kind of political consensus building, especially the moment where the ministers from China, US, EU, and all the other countries were on the same stage. I think that was really a rare moment in international relations. And obviously within the same month, you also have President Xi and President Biden meeting in San Francisco. And that one is probably even more significant, where you have the top leaders meeting in person and saying that we need an intergovernmental dialogue on AI. And at least with the readout from the White House document, the focus would be on the risk from advanced AI systems. And so in some way, maybe the Bletchley Summit provided the background in which some of these dialogues and conversations continue. Yeah.
You're talking about the UK summit. This is a question I have for Huang Yi, because I remember when China was invited to this summit. Well, actually, the biggest controversy regarding the UK summit is whether we should invite China. Okay,
Yeah.
so this has been debated for months, and this is the single biggest headlines regarding the UK summit. And then after, you know, the UK government disclosed that they are inviting China, then the tabloids in UK will say, then China should only be invited to one day. You know, the second day will not be invited. Will be left to the, you know, the rich countries to decide, because we don't want, China can only join half the program. And then China responded like, if that's the case, well, I'm not coming. Okay, so of course, right? I mean, and then eventually China was in, right? But you heard, like, you know, including UK former Prime Minister Liz Truss was saying that, you know, we should rescind the invitation for China, right? I mean, you see very strong oppositions in the Western governments about China's participation in global conversations. You know, why do you think that it's essential for China to participate in the global dialogue?
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, President.
Hello, great. Thank you so much for the question, Angela. So I guess Professor Tsoukalos in his excellent keynote speech has already said that no global AI regulation could truly be effective without China's participation. So anything I say here is just extra padding in support of his point. But I think China really has a lot to bring to the table in global regulatory discussions for generative AI. And I'll just highlight 3 aspects here. So one, in terms of regulatory experience, second, in terms of technical expertise, and third, in terms of knowledgeable experts. So in regulatory experience, I guess a lot of the speakers and audience have already discussed in this conference. I won't delve into much further here, but China has been really at the forefront of developing and adapting these generative AI regulations that have introduced these potent and flexible tools like the algorithm registry and security review that are, well, currently oriented towards issues like perhaps social stability and content moderation, but could also be used to tackle other risks from generative AI, including maybe harder to predict or emergent ones as well. And so, again, I'm sure many of you in the audience know more about this than I do, so I won't elaborate much further. But on the second point, not just regulations, I think, can't be captured by the technocratic elite alone, as Professor Tsoukalos has excellently pointed out in his keynote. But I do think that technical experts are helpful for contributing to regulatory discussions. And China has a wealth of technical expertise. And there's great potential for researchers from the US, China, around the world to work together on finding solutions to some technical safety challenges in AI, like robustness, assurance, explainability, like Professor Habuka has mentioned. And there's already a small but growing community in China of researchers exploring issues relating to generative AI risks, such as exploring reinforcement learning from human feedback or constitutional AI. And just a little bit of self-promotion at Concordia AI, we recently released a 160-page report on the state of AI safety in China, where we identified at least 13 AI labs and research groups working on tackling these issues. So my overall point here is that China has a lot of technical AI safety work going on, maybe more than some observers might expect. But my final point here is no matter how complete the legal framework, the rapid pace of AI development demands agility in regulations, as the audience and speakers discussed in the previous panel. And so the regulations will have to be adjusted over time. And this might be based on, these adjustments have to be based on the different concerns that emerge as we gain better understanding of the technology, as our perceptions of the risks evolve. And I think Chinese perceptions of AI risks is therefore critical components feeding into regulatory discussions. And as of late 2023, there is a robust body of Chinese experts who are expressing concerns about attempting to mitigate the technical and ethical risks from generative AI systems and advanced AI. So there's probably a lot more common understanding on the nature of risks than one might think, despite the geopolitical differences. We've already talked about Bletchley. I guess I'll just raise one other example here quickly. In around October, there was a joint paper co-authored by Yoshua Benjo, Jeffrey Hinton, but also a few Chinese experts, including 4 deans from Tsinghua University, as well as 1 dean from the East China University of Political Science and Law. This article was titled Managing Risks in an Era of Rapid AI Progress, which identified common risks that the experts saw with generative AI, as well as some policy recommendations to mitigate those risks, such as a licensing regime and public and private spending on AI safety and ethics, or further research on AI safety and ethics. So yeah, I just want to wrap up here by saying that despite the geopolitical differences, as Brian mentioned, the risks from AI, both ethical and technical, do not respect national borders. And so we really want to build on this common ground here that we can find and jointly work together to find solutions.
Yeah, the paper that you mentioned, I read it. I love it. I mean, it's a
Thank you.
really good piece for anyone who wants to understand the magnitude of AI risks. And you can also see, you know, from the number of co-authors that a very diverse background, that it's actually a consensus among the scientific community about the importance of facilitating international cooperation to govern AI. Although at the political level, you know, it's like an entirely different story. Yeah. So let me turn this question to you, okay? Because China has been very active in international cooperation in I would say, you know, since President Xi came in and became president. And, you know, we see China is very active in climate change dialogue, very active in the Belt and Road Initiative. And then very recently, President Xi unveiled this China's global AI initiative at the 3rd Belt and Road, you know, summit in Beijing. It's actually prepared. That's a declaration prepared by the Cyberspace Administration of China. What do you think is China's ambition and its, you know, its strategy in shaping and influencing AI's norms and global cooperation in the future?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, to be honest, I haven't really involved into the work you mentioned about directly. Yeah, but I can share some point of view from myself as maybe as the industry player. Yeah. Actually, the global AI governance initiative issued by China, I think emphasizes the reliability and controllability and equitability, and also more international inclusive cooperation. Yeah, it's mainly, I think, in the principle level. So I think I don't want to talk too much about the content due to the time limitation. And it's certain that China can contribute much to the global AI governance based on this capacity in terms of the technology and application and the industry and the development in the industry, and especially for the generative AI, which we already discussed a lot yesterday and in the morning. Yeah, according to its pioneer work. Yeah, and what more? Let me think about from what can contribute more if looking forward to the future. Yeah, let's think about from the 3 aspects. Yet I think from regulatory policy. Yeah, I think China is taking an agile governance way. Yeah, and moving quickly, especially for generative AI governance. Of course, it's still not perfect, and there are doubts, and there are still many open challenges. Yeah, but I think it's iterating quickly. It's continuously improved. So this can contribute to the trial experience to the world. And despite I think the different charter and even in the values are not always same. Yeah, but we need to notice that regarding to the risks of generative AI, actually there are many consensus and common concerns like the misinformation, disinformation, and privacy protection, yeah, and of course the content and the safety. So that's why I think the China's regulatory experience can be the benefit of the world. Yeah, that's the first point. And the secondly, I want to take the consideration from the R&D. Yeah, because you know the risks brought by generative AI is mostly results from its essential based on the probability and its uncertainty. So how to get a more explainable and interpretable theoretically. There need many research work to do. Yeah, and China's I think input vast investment into the R&D both in academic and the industry. Yeah. For example, one of the top research institute, Tsinghua Intelligent Research Institute, they are trying to combine the knowledge with the data and to find the new direction to get more explainable, yeah, technology. Yeah. That's another point. The second, thirdly, I want to say from the industry pillar, yeah, as I just mentioned, the players, not both the big tech and the professional AI companies in AI safety area are also doing many works to exploring engineering measures to make the AI safety happen in practically. Yeah. So by the technical measures and by AI governance measures and built in the measures into the whole life cycle, and you can see a lot of such kind of trial works made by China's industrial players. So I think this is another point can benefit in the future. Yeah. So all about this are what China can contribute to the global governance and the responsible development. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we talk about, it's important to get China onto the table for global cooperation, and but what has China done, to coordinate and to participate in international cooperation initiatives? Because for the large part, what we observe is like China is not part of the game of a lot of the important international organization governing AI. If you think about OECD or the G7s, right? I mean, like the EU, and it seems like China is primarily involved in a lot of the UN, organizations. What do you think of these organizations? How much impact that may have? Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for the question, Angela. So I agree, China has been excluded by default from organizations or major AI governance initiatives like the OECD or the G7 process. But regardless, since around 2016, China has actively participated in international AI governance efforts, for example, with regard to discussions on lethal autonomous weapons, on standard setting. Perhaps Mr. Liu could talk a little bit more about that later, but also ethical principles. And at the same time, I think 2023 really has marked this phase shift in China's efforts to participate in international AI governance. You've mentioned the Global AI Governance Initiative earlier, but even before that, even back in April this year, China actually elevated international cooperation on AI governance to one of its flagship foreign policy initiatives, the Global Security Initiative, where AI was listed as one of the 20 cooperation priorities. And perhaps I'll be able to talk a little bit more about similar initiatives preceding the Global AI Governance Initiative later on. But I think there really is, therefore, important role China is playing and can play in facilitating international cooperation in generative AI regulation. I'll just name a couple here. One, sharing domestic governance mechanisms. So we see that each country and AI lab at the moment are experimenting intensely, feverishly to kind of perfect this cocktail of AI governance policies for their different contexts. But there are a lot of similarities between these sets of policies than some may expect. So, for example, there was the Senate, a bipartisan framework put forward by Senators Blumenthal and Hawley in the US a while back, where they proposed a national oversight body, a licensing regime, safety incident reporting for governing AI systems that bear a lot of similarities to an expert draft of China's upcoming national AI law that was released a few months back, and actually some of the speakers worked on from yesterday. But there's a great opportunity, therefore, I think, here for countries to learn from each other's domestic governance experimentations and just share lessons and adapt them to different domestic contexts. Second, which was sort of partially alluded to with Brian's response earlier, sharing benefits from AI development is also extremely important. Regulation can't just be pushed forward by technology companies alone, and we also need to consider, therefore, the interests of ordinary citizens and developing countries. So given, I think, China's role as a major member of the developing countries, as well as a leading AI power, it could have a really important role to play in this issue. One really interesting early stage proposal I just want to share here is to incorporate underrepresented languages in large language models. So China's National Pengcheng Laboratory has constructed this diverse corpus data set with languages, including Chinese, English, but also 50 other languages on the Belt and Road Initiative. And these are, I think, interesting proposals that international development bodies or different international actors could begin to experiment and research to close development gaps while ensuring that safety of AI systems is a bottom line.
Right. Can I also ask Brian about China's participation? So the UN recently introduced a high-level advisory board on AI, and China have two representatives on the board. Well, we initially invited one of them to today's panel, but unfortunately, so Professor Zhang Linghan from the Chinese Political Science University, but unfortunately she was ill and she wasn't able to come. Yeah, but I guess she was ill because she traveled to the UN to have the conference. I was too tired. She got it on the trip. Yeah, and so yeah, tell us about this UN advisory. What do you call it? UN advisory body, right? I mean, what do they do, and do you think that they will play an important role?
Yeah.
In the future? Yeah.
Just a little bit of context. A few months ago, the UN convened the first meeting on AI risk and international peace. And so the Secretary General has been thinking about this for a few months, and the expert panel is really a kind of capacity building initiative, right? Convening a group of 39 experts around the world, including 2 from China. And the body strive to be kind of gender balanced, geographically diverse. And I think from my perspective is really trying to provide legitimacy to the UN Secretary General and the potential recommendations to member states. And they are now tasked with 3 things. One is providing recommendations on international governance of AI. Second is identifying the shared risk and challenges from the technology. And third, also coming up with enablers and opportunities for using AI in SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. And they have a pretty tight deadline. So they have to give the first report by the end of this year. And maybe that's the reason why Professor Zhang has been very tired. And I heard from some of the experts that they have been spending several hours every week meeting and writing recommendations. And
or are they something concrete?
We don't quite know yet, but that's the first version by the end of this year. And the final version would be released around the Summit on the Future in September next year. And that would basically be a big international gathering of member states to discuss AI and the Global Digital Compact. And I think, despite all the challenges and kind of complaints around the UN system, if you look at the history of the UN, you have, IAEA, IPCC that we have already talked about, but also the International Civil Aviation Organization that was all established under the UN umbrella. So maybe we should, try to support it and give it some time and hope before we have more complaints about the UN.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, just to be frank, I mean,
Yeah.
people, UN experts that I spoke with were quite skeptical
Right.
that it will achieve, a big impact because, over the years, the UN's status is in the international community has declined. And, the UN is actually thinking about introducing an international organization to govern AI, query whether, I don't know whether you guys have any insider information about that or, what is the timeline, how likely they're going to do this or?
That is a big question mark. Yeah.
But at least they have the high level advisory body and it seems like have really good people and we have 2 representatives on the board, which is great. Now, we talk a lot about this international organization. It seems like nothing really concrete come out of this. And I personally think that maybe the most promising path is standard setting. I don't know whether you agree with me because you are a real standard setting expert here. And I know Huawei is a leading player in standard setting, particularly with 5G technologies. So I really want to understand, what do you think, how important standard setting is to harmonize the global efforts to regulate AI?
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, standardization is quite important can play quite important role to support the AI governance. Yeah, especially to consider in the implementation level and as a ICT company, yeah, Huawei is paying much effort into the standard area. Yeah, actually, in recent years, not only in the regulatory channel, but in the standard channel, many works already done and already ongoing. Yeah, let's quickly sort out the global standard work for AI and AI governance. The most important international standard organization for AI and AI governance is the ISO/IEC GTC 42. Yeah, it works on 4 main aspects like the basic concepts and the terminologies. In technology area like AI, it's changing so fast. Yeah, it gets the basic concept and the terminology is very important. Yeah, from the
AI. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah.
concept.
Yeah. What's the definition of AI and what's the definition of the fairness? What's the definition of accountability? Yeah, that's very important. Yeah, and often to need a long time to discussion and to get the consensus. Yeah, and the other important aspect is the management system. Yeah, like the quality maybe we all know the traditional quality management system like the ISO 9001. Yeah, but in their area, yeah, the experts is working on the AI management systems. Yeah, based on the traditional quality management system. Yeah, and also the trustworthy characteristics like the robustness and the controllability and so on. And also the data is very important. Yeah, the very important topic also include the data quality for machine learning. Yeah. I think all these works have provided a very Actually, there are a lot of standards already published. Yeah, and they provided a very practical and effective guidance for the AI and AI governance. For instance, the AI management system actually it's a series of standards, including the framework of management and risk management framework for the organizations, not only for the providers, but also for the users as well. Yeah, and it's provide with practical measures and activities and key control points in the very suitable and proper granularity, yeah, through the whole life cycle. Very operational and not involve too much details, and have a good balance, because you need the flexibility. If you involve too much details, yeah, you will lose the flexibility. Yeah. So regarding to the governance of generative AI, it's just the international organization, standard organization, has just started the work. Yeah. At last plenary, yeah, on October, yeah, actually. Yeah. I also want to mention a little bit about the European standard. Europe, to support the EU Act, yeah, the EU Commission, European Commission had issued the 10 requirements, yeah, to the standard organizations like the Science and GTC 21 and GTC 13, yeah, mainly focused on the support to EU Act, like the quality management and the conformity assessment and the data quality and accountability and so on. And all these standards are very important and beneficial for effective governance and of AI. Despite the global legislation is still ongoing, but we can see in the standard channel, many meaningful works have been already done based on the consensus and the trends, which is already presented so far. But sure.
Standards in relation to generative AI. Have China proposed any?
Actually, you know, so far there is not, because generative AI is so cutting edge, and even domestically, China is there working on his national standard. So maybe I think maybe in the future, next year, we'll give some proposals, yeah, to the international organization.
Domestically, there have been some standard setting bodies. TC 260. We talked about yesterday. They proposed 4 or something.
That's TC 260. Yeah, that's information security standardization technical committee. Yeah. Yes, they already published several specifications in the for the generative AI security, like the fundamental specification of security, and also the pre-training data security and the content labeling and so on. Yeah, but that's there is no national standard, because it's still on ongoing, yeah, and working.
Right. I wonder if China proposed standards in relation to generative AI in global standard setting bodies, who will be the actors promoting this? Would it be Chinese companies, or would it be the Chinese standard setting body, or just a group effort?
Yeah, I think that's similar with other countries. That's a group works, yeah, from the industry and from the academic and the research institute. Yeah.
So my understanding is usually the company who has the most cutting edge technology, the country has the most cutting edge technology, will be able to propose more standards, just like why China has proposed a lot of standards for 5G, right? I mean, because Huawei has this technology. But with regard to generative AI, we are not standing at the forefront, right? I mean, do you see that China will have less prospect in shaping the standards in the global community?
Yeah, I fully agree with you idea that to contribute to the standard, yeah, you need to have maybe the cutting edge or experienced practices and technology. I think we only consider the standardization for the generative AI. There are so many open challenges and topics. Yeah, so maybe generally the China maybe still have the gap. Yeah, with maybe with the US. Yeah, but maybe in some certain area we can also contribute some work. Yeah.
Jiaqi, would you like to chime in on the standard setting question?
Yes, I totally agree. Standard setting is one of the most important tools to harmonize our rules or practices or sometimes regulations. And I know that there is a lot of discussions going on. The ISO, as Mr. Lee explained, and also the EUA actually refers to a lot of standards, EU standards, and one of the reasons is that just as mentioned by Professor Tasio in the keynote speech, regulators cannot provide specific rules because things are too complicated and changes too fast. So instead of setting detailed rules, regulations can say basic principles or values as goal-based or outcome-based or principle-based. And if so, there is a huge gap between the regulation and practice, and standards are something to fill the gap of the regulation and practice. So standards can be developed by multi-stakeholders, especially by leading companies or leading civil societies in a swift manner, agile manner, and it's not necessarily binding rules, meaning that if you can achieve the regulatory goals without complying with the standards, still it's okay. If you can invent new methodology to achieve the better goals or better outcome about the goals. So this is standards, and I'm very happy about a lot of progress has made in recent 2 or 3 years about the regulation setting. But it's again just a standard, and for example, in G7 agreement, they say we are going to support international technical standards. And technical is an important part. It's relatively easy to agree on some technical threshold or technical definition of some systems or some risks. But there's another challenge, which is also mentioned in the keynote speech, it's that ethical risks or a balance of values. For example, the risks, how to define privacy or how to define social risks to a social order or social harmonization, or how to define inappropriate biases, because all AI has some biases, but what is inappropriate or unacceptable bias is a real question, and there is no specific answer. That's why I also believe that there should be some pluralistic approach. And still, I'm hopeful that we can agree on something on that. For example, even though we cannot agree on specific answers, specific regulations, but maybe we can agree on specific processes to make agreement, especially because now our democratic system is so out of date. We still elect some parliament members through voting, and they decide everything. So it's a part of the democracy, but it's not everything about democracy. We can maybe use AI technologies to do more specific deliberative democracy. Or maybe we can design a better dispute resolution system using AI or other technologies. And for that kind of processes, or I would say a new form of rule of law, could be agreed among like-minded countries. And I'm looking forward to the development of standards or international agreement on that aspect.
Right, excellent. Well, we are actually running out of time. I do want to leave sufficient time for Q&A. Any questions? Yes, Brian?
Thanks so much again for the sharing. Actually, Brian, we'd met before. You had more hair at the time. This was actually in a different era, and this is relevant because we met in Shanghai during the World AI Shanghai Summit in 2019 before COVID, when Elon Musk was speaking with Jack Ma, right? So this is how long I've been involved. But it was a different time, right? Musk was there in Shanghai. We were all talking together. Fast forward, we are in our current environment. It was interesting to note that you talk about the UN high level, and I'd actually worked with the Japanese and the Korean. We're part of a Asian Dialogue on AI Governance initiative, which I think is important as we deal with this. And which gets to my question. Given what we have right now, it seems like one of the things we need to do is avoid suspicion. There's suspicion both from a state level, there's suspicion with private sectors, right? And as I look at some of these representatives, I also looked at the joint the consensus paper. I think there's a role that universities can play in relation to that. For at least for now, there's a degree of legitimacy that certain universities have, although right now in the US, some universities are under challenge in terms of legitimacy, right? So one question to the panel is, what role do you think that universities can play? But significantly, if you look at the representatives on the consensus paper, and even here, which faculties should really be involved, right? If you have just the technicians sitting together, right, they may agree on certain technical standards, and I've been involved in blockchain standards, and that gets really complicated. ISO challenges and lots of different. So there, people have tried the standards approach with, like, for example, blockchain. So which faculties? We have law here, philosophy, I think definitely has a role. Political science, right? So I think we've talked about interdisciplinary, but perhaps we should actually act upon it a little bit more. Love to hear your thoughts there, because perhaps across the different universities in China, but in the global South as well, and in the West, that we can have more candid discussions here without animosity and putting aside, geopolitical elements. Thanks.
Brian, would you like to take this question?
You go ahead.
Yeah, so one big picture observation is that the power of AI development is very concentrated in the big tech today, and it's going to be even more so in the coming years, I believe. So if we look at the trend of AI in the past decade, computational power has been driving a lot of progress and is increasing at a rate of about 1 order of magnitude every year. And human brains have a hard time in extrapolating exponential progress, but the curve is not this, is this, right? And it's really only a very small number of companies, primarily in the US and to some extent in China, that have the computational power and all the resources driving this innovation. And so the question is, what is the role of universities and academics? I think the AI-CV industry in the UK has this institutional innovation where you have basically a startup within government, right? With academics and experts with access to the models from Anthropic and other companies. And if we kind of broaden this with a global perspective, can we do this, if with even a greater diversity of models, with a greater diversity of participants? One idea is we see a DevCon conference in the US where you have hundreds and thousands of cybersecurity experts coming together and discover vulnerabilities in large models. So can we host something in Asia with models from China and from other regions, and basically engage with academics and experts in the region? I think that might be quite fruitful.
Yes, I see, and you have a question. Yes, introduce yourself and then.
Actually, it's very related to the question that was just asked, which was nicely answered. So I'm actually a doctoral student at MIT. And my research has involved explainability, which has been a recurring topic, in these 2 days. Specifically, how do we incorporate human domain knowledge into ML models? So my question was very much along the same lines, right? But can you speak a little bit to how perhaps a different angle is what are some existing or current efforts of engaging cutting edge academic researchers and computer scientists, right? Literally like people who understand the math behind AI in this standard setting process, with governments in your various countries and parts of the world, as well as international cooperation in this front, right? Because you just now mentioned, right, having an Asia thing, right? How can we have international cooperation between, scientists and governments and, philosophers and political scientists? Thank you.
This is very relevant. Can I just add a quick remark? So right now, a lot of the advances in AI is about engineering. It's not really about science. If we look at large language models, right, it's a lot of data, more compute, and so on. But user Benjo has been proposing this idea of system to AI, not just system one. We actually need to understand what is going on in a conceptual level. And at Tsinghua University, Professor Zhang Bo has also been proposing this idea of third generational AI, incorporating knowledge into these complex AI systems. And so this is an area where academics could play a very useful role, right? You don't need compute to do conceptual and the mathematical reasoning and research. And so this is also an area where international cooperation could be possible, just on kind of basic foundational research.
Kwang Yi and Brian, their job is to facilitate international cooperation. This is on their mind, 24/7. Okay, yes.
Okay. So my question is where the panelists talk about a lot about like top-down approach, how international organizations or other governmental institutions are trying to develop some rules. And as far as I understand, actually on these, like, let's say, emerging frontiers of law, it will be very difficult for governments to agree on particular ethics and rules. So my question here is, do you see any trend there will be any code of conduct that will be developed among industries, the companies, that we can see some sort of bottom-up approach, that we see the standards first, and then that will be pushed forward the international legislation?
Yeah, so I think definitely while we're seeing a lot of activity on the government or international organization level, I think there's also quite a lot of exchanges happening at the, what I think you might classify as the bottom-up level with in academia, with industry exchanges. So the dialogue that Angela and I were part of, we were discussing the governance of generative AI systems at Yale, and I think that Angela perhaps might agree, we found it a very fruitful discussion to exchange what different countries were doing in global AI regulations, generative AI regulations in their respective jurisdictions. And earlier I mentioned the Managing AI Risks paper with a few Chinese co-authors, as well as luminaries around the world, from like Yoshua Bengio, Daniel Kahneman, Yuval Noah Harari's, like co-authoring that joint paper. Some of those co-authors actually went on to a dialogue, to co-convene or participate in a dialogue hosted by the Ditchley Foundation, where they kind of pushed forward, I think, discussed some of the issues discussed in that joint paper, and also sort of presented this declaration just a couple of days preceding the UK Global AI Safety Summit, just suggesting some of these potential policies that governments, international organizations, other AI actors could adopt for managing potential risks from AI and ensuring the safe development of AI. So yeah, I do see quite a lot of activity happening at the bottom-up level as well. So while that could definitely be more, I think there's some criticism potentially about, well, there's so many dialogues happening, maybe this is just getting to be a bit of a talk shop, nothing really productive is being put forward. But at this moment, when no one has, I think, the answer to global AI governance, what do we do with ensuring the safe and beneficial development of AI? Talk shops are helpful for just brainstorming ideas and coming up with new proposals. So I say, well, we definitely need both the top-down and bottom-up elements. So yeah, thank you for raising that point.
Yeah, I mean, this is really important. Yeah, the bottom-up efforts is something that I was amazed by when I attended the Yale conference, which was also attended by the representative from Microsoft, OpenAI, and Anthropic. And there actually tremendous interest within the US industry in collaborating with top Chinese tech firms in forming some standards regard to AI. I mean, just a very basic one about watermark or some very basic technical standards, because that is really helpful at the product level. I think there's both commercial incentive, there's strong commercial incentive to facilitate this kind of industry leveled cooperations. So despite the not be too pessimistic about, the international cooperation. I mean, the bottom-up efforts may eventually, drive countries to have some sort of consensus in international cooperation. Yeah. Okay.
Just can I add one very short comment? Yes, it's a great question. Code of conduct is one thing, but another important thing is contract, because there are a lot of stakeholders on the value chains of AI, and since there is no specific or detailed regulations, the liabilities or duties, obligations are distributed under the contract. So we need some standardized contract between data provider and AI developer, or AI developer and AI provider or AI provider and AI users. And there are a lot of different practices going on, and in most cases, the majority of contract clauses are defined by the terms and conditions of global tech firms. So how to provide a more fair standard of contract template is, I think it's another important aspect. And in Japan, the government issues a model contract guidelines for data transfer and also AI development, but I'm not very familiar with any global standard on that exists. So this is my comments and question.
Yes.
I can give two quick examples about the bottom-up work. Yeah, one is I think the industrial alliance, can play a very important role, to set up, to provide a platform to collect the many kind of players to share their experience and to get the best practices. Yeah, like we also like Huawei also in China, we also joined the AI industry alliance, the biggest AI industry consortium. Yeah, that's one example. And another example is for Huawei internal governance. We also we also to train the engineers in front line. Yeah, to do the work actively while the whole life cycle by design and develop and the test work. Yeah, and then we may accumulate the best practices to set up the guidelines in the company level. Yeah, and this is another kind of the bottom-up work. Yeah.
Excellent. So we have 2 minutes left. We still have time for one last question, very short one. Yes. Introduce yourself, please.
Okay, thank you much. I'm Jiaqi. I think I'm the engineer here. So I work with a data scientist and also the AI engineer. I came from Science Park. So in these 2 days, I think I would like to share something pretty different from what you share. As a data scientist, I think the AI or the ChatGPT bring the general attention to the AI, but the very beginning of the AI, starting from 1960s or 1970s. Why now? Why the general public to concern about the generative AI? I think because the ChatGPT really highly attached the social media and the social impact. But what I can see from the best scientists in Science Park, they are not doing the ChatGPT nor the LM model. Just I can share some just few examples. Some biomedical firm or research center in Science Park, they use AI to use in the drug discovery. For example, the new cancer drug and also some new disease. And some material company, they use AI to think the physics and the chemistry and develop and find out new material or new molecule or material. And some doctors or scientists, they use the AI to be the assistant to do the brain surgery and make a better surgery experience for the patient. So I can see that there's an empty part of the conversation during these 2 days, but they are much more important than the LLM and then the ChatGPT. And I think there's no regulation there, and you cannot regulate them. Somehow it's quite scary for me because I think it's over-regulating the best scientists to do the best things because when they're doing the research, they focus on the research itself. They do not have the burden of the laws or all kinds of things. They only focus on doing the bad things. Yeah, that is my sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, this is perfect timing. You really make the best use of the time, and thank you for suggesting the potential topics for future events. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of the conference. So I would like to take a moment to express my thanks to all of the wonderful speakers that we have. You guys are absolutely amazing. So, you know, a lot of the audience came to me and tell me how wonderful you guys were. And I feel so, so happy that you accepted my invitation and you came all the way to Hong Kong and to participate in this event. And I also thank my very engaged audience here. You guys are very kind and stay all the whole time. You know, vast majority of you guys stay for 1.5 days. You know, it's a really long, like a marathon conference. It's a very engaged audience. So thank you guys for supporting our event. And I hope that you will do that in the future. So personally, this is my last term as director. I have run the center for more than 5 years, so I have to step down. I already exceeded the mandatory retirement. So I need to retire from this center. And I worked really hard for this event because I want it to be great. Because this is probably my last conference, the last big conference I will organize for the Center for Chinese Law. So I think that it went okay, right? I mean, so thank you, because this is an emotional moment. We spent 3 months on this thing. And now I want to thank, okay, before that, I want to do the nagging thing. You guys need to do the evaluation, okay? No, but I want to thank the real heroes behind this conference. Shelby Chen, yes? And Joanne Zhen, yeah? I don't know whether Louisa is here. I mean, so many colleagues have generously supported our event. I personally particularly want to highlight Shelby because she's leaving us the end of this month. She's my secretary. We work next to each other very closely from the beginning. I came into the center. You were my, right hand lady, supporting me and giving me wonderful support. And I'm so sad that you are leaving us. And but I'm very happy for you that you're moving on to a wonderful opportunity. So, best of luck to you. And, I just want to recognize your invaluable contribution to the center. So I don't know who will be the next center director, but I'm sure he or she will carry on the torch. And I hope our audience here and, maybe the audience in front of the camera in the future watching the live streaming, the recording, will continue to support our center and make it great. Okay, thank you guys.